Hello everyone, and welcome. Today I will attempt to beat Persona 3 Reload with Makoto Yuki, only on Merciless. I'm making this video immediately after finishing my first playthrough of P3R. I've played P3 for the fourth time with this remake, making this challenge the fifth, and I really enjoyed it. So to start, I will lay out a few self-imposed rules of my own. I will only be using the Protagonist, Makoto Yuki in battle. Of course, no cheats in battle. Healing out of battle with party members is allowed. And that's about it. I would also like to mention, I will be using certain value editors to help speed up the production time of this video. That has to do with money, Twilight Shards, and social stats. To prevent myself from buying 99 of every healing item and spamming it in the early game, I'll set a limit of 10 max of every item until about mid-game, so around late block 3. Also, I will actively avoid abusing my inventory during battle. That said, it's not like Pokemon where you can just buy 20 hyper potions and then spam them at the gym. This is more of a quality of life feature since money with Megaton is extremely stingy early game, and some titles that last the entire experience. Since this is a challenge run where the main focus is about battles and progression themselves, allowing me to finish all social links and have fun mixing and matching personas along with different strategies helps with the enjoyment for both you guys and myself. I find it to be a win-win all around. If you all would like to see more of these types of videos, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you'll be notified when I release another upload. Okay, now that that's out the way, let's get started with the challenge. But before we do, I'd like to say, thank you for watching. Now let's get started. I will be skipping most of the dialogue and cutscenes for the sake of not making this already 30-hour challenge even longer. And whoa, look at that, social stats are maxed. Anyway, we're on the first night of Tartarus, and well, it goes about how you'd expect the prologue to go. I immediately tried to take Yukari and Junpei off my team, however, that was a big no-no from Mitsuru. The Ruthless Ice Ravens, Barbaric Beast Wheel, and the Swift Axle were all nothing much to talk about. They were all swiftly defeated, so let's move on to the Priestess on the first operation. Starting with this boss, the first thing I had to consider was how will I beat this boss before the time limit. For the initial first few takes, that was the first barrier to get over. Buffing and debuffing solely did not work, since when you're solo, instead of the maximum 3 turns you can get when you're in a party, you only get around a turn or two to really deal higher damage, not taking into account healing, keeping up with constant buffs and debuffs, and how many enemies are on the field. As we get further in the game, this will only be a running theme as well. The Priestess specializes in primarily Bufu attacks, while her minions often do Garu, Agi, and Koha. See, the Koha is what we want to focus in on. Our persona, Unicorn, which we fused prior, innately nullifies Bufu and Koha, the 2 elements that are primarily used in this fight. By baiting that specific shadow, we can guarantee that she will not resummon her other damage-dealing allies. That said, I of course made the mistake of killing it a few times. Now that I figured the strategy out, it's a race against time to take her out, and after several attempts, I finally got the perfect run where she simply couldn't do anything to us, and this time we used our own Koha to take her out. The Will-O-Wisp Raven took me an embarrassing amount of attempts. It started off with me trying to brute force the boss, but clearly that wasn't the answer, which we'll see later on applies in many situations. I at first thought maybe Oberon with Null Zeo would help counter the Lightning Ravens, which it initially did. I had to take into account the Agilao damage from the main Raven. Ultimately it wasn't a difficult boss, but it was a roadblock for sure that was meant to check the hell out of me. Once I went through a few losses, going from levels 14 to 16, and doing some overdue fusing, I made Oberon this time have Garu and Adutaru Kaja, which helped my odds of winning exponentially by taking out the Zeo Ravens, effectively guaranteeing the win once I swapped back to Fortuna with Bufu. So doing my original plan but with measures to counter the Zeo birds. Heretic Magius was easy, prepping from the last floor boss lined perfectly with Fortuna's nullifications. For the disturbing dice, aside from the annoying ass crit, the battle wasn't a problem either. We ended up clapping his ass back with the crit. The battle wasn't a problem either. We ended up clapping his ass back with a crit. The Clairvoyant Relic went a bit different. I decided to attempt the fight knowing it really wouldn't be possible even at level 20, so I grinded to 21, but I guess there wasn't really any fusions available. I'll attempt the boss again, but I'm not expecting much. I can't believe I actually got that crit. If that would have kept happening and the relic got dizzy, I would have been able to make it work. But of course it didn't. I decided to grind a bit more to level 23. This is the plan I landed on. We're going to lead with Narcissus' Zionga. This will be boosted with Auto Taru Kaja and hopefully proc the shock, which I'll get into why in a moment. The Auto Suku Kaja will help boost the hit rate, and most importantly raise evasion for incoming attacks, until I can land a shock. It also helps that Narcissus will be dealt neutral damage to all the relic's attacks, since it isn't weak to any of the 4 elements. Once shocked, I will switch to Take Mikazuchi, which then I'll use Fatal End until I can hopefully land a crit. Lennon said he will be our final key player by giving us our much needed diorama healing. And with that, let's see how this attempt goes. To be honest, that wasn't half bad. The shock didn't proc at all, however damage and healing was very consistent. I also got a little greedy towards the end, but I think this will work. I'm going to give it a few more tries to see. Well, it only took another try and this run was easily the most flawless. So it actually starts off with me getting a shock off. However, once I used Fatal End, nothing really happened. It was at this point that I didn't really think getting a crit was very likely with slash moves. Either way, I still benefited from getting shocks off since it's extra damage. From there, it was simply a battle of patience, slowly withering it down while keeping in mind my own health. Honestly, it was a great fight, the most fun by far. With that completes floors 23 through 43. Time to move on to the Emperor and Empress. We're finally up to the Emperor and Empress. I've been looking forward to this so that I can finally get Fuka for weakness detection. I don't think the bosses themselves will be all that much of a problem. To go on a quick side tangent, during my first playthrough I wanted to get some of the outfits like the armor for the girls and then the tuxedos for the guys, but I somehow never came across them. The other day I read online that you can get the outfits out of chests, specifically the chests that appear after you beat each floor's boss. So after beating the relic boss a few minutes ago, I decided to go back and check all the chests, and I found a tuxedo, which unfortunately was Junpei's, not Makoto's. I plan on opening up all the locked chests specifically for Makoto and Fuka's outfits. I'm very excited to get them since I haven't actually seen them in game yet. Anyways, there isn't a whole lot to talk about here. This fight was extremely easy since they have set weaknesses that barely change after the first time. This was another mandatory party member fight, but it really didn't matter since Junpei is like level 3 and Akihiko is whatever level he started with. It was so easy in fact that I didn't even heal or think to do so until the very end when I was left at barely any HP. Well, looks like that does it for our first moon boss duo. I forgot to mention before, while mindlessly going through the days up until the Emperor and Empress, I've been going to the arcade which gives stat boosts to the currently held persona. The thing is, I checked Mithra stats and something about that felt a bit too strong. Considering I'm editing my cache, it sort of feels cheap, so I'll stick to only going to the arcade when I seriously need it or there's a roadblock. Editor's note, I never went back to the arcade because I didn't need it. Unfortunately, that's all there really is to do at night aside from grinding social stats and jobs. There's just so little to do at night overall. It's such a missed opportunity when considering there is an overwhelming amount of daytime social links that are available compared to the nighttime S-links. Anyways, we're on the floors 44 to 69. These next upcoming floors will only have 3 floor bosses, which is not too bad compared to what we'll be seeing within the next 40 floors. That being said, I much prefer the plentiful amount of bosses in P3. The only thing that I wish is that each section had its own unique soundtrack to complement each block theme. I've gotta say, seeing that scene for the first time felt crazy. I didn't watch many of the P3 Reload trailers, so seeing them all kitted out with their new gear was a big surprise, but it was also a welcomed one. Now for the upcoming section, once again a party is forced, so we'll be ignoring the team once again, but it will be over quickly. Now that that's out the way, onto the first boss of this expedition, the Servant Tower. Yeah, it was a complete wipe, no contest. Fuka asks me if I'm gonna keep going solo. Well, of course I am. It's really cute that everyone is cheering Makoto on and Fuka saying she's excited. Well, that's a big motivator to keep pressing on. This next fight was such a wash. It went so smooth for the first attempt until I got charmed at the very end. Apparently poison doesn't kill, but it leaves at 1 HP, which is interesting. I never use ailments since the majority of bosses in Megaton either resist them or outright just aren't affected by them. It turns out it worked exceptionally well. It's honestly really fun to use exceptional skills and tactics that normally you just don't use in a regular playthrough. Next attempt went the exact same way, but this time I didn't go for the poison, since Lamia has a random ass physical weakness. But it's the last of the small amount of floor boss fights, and let me tell you, this did not play out like I expected. The fleet-footed cavalry has ridiculous defenses, which is something I thought being level 28 would help combat since we have the disadvantage of being solo, but apparently not. After leveling up to level 29, I went back and did a bit of fusing and well, just see for yourself. I got 2 skill changes. First was the Pierce boost, second was Zeodyne and Growth 2 on Synteta. The Zeodyne is huge for early game, plus the Growth 1 to Growth 2 makes background leveling so much better. This was a really good haul for what took me no more than 2 or 3 minutes of grinding a golden hand. The following attempt felt so good. It's genuinely crazy how much of a difference one level makes, both for the available persona options and the simple power boost. It turns out Pierce boost plus Torrent shot, along with stat buffs, makes a hell of a difference. And to run a victory lap, I got a crit and hit maximum roll Torrent shot, so 4 times. It's such a good feeling. As a reward, I got another tuxedo, but unfortunately it was Akihiko's. Now all that awaits is the next moon bosses, the Hierophant and the Lovers. I can honestly see this back-to-back moon boss fight being a pain in the ass, but we'll see how it goes. And it was a pain in the ass. First attempt of Hierophant went absolutely horrible. No setup, I accidentally healed my party members, and it turns out that there is no option to use Fuka's buffs outside of battle, which is a big annoyance. Let's try again this time, but with everything I need. Third attempt goes well initially, but ultimately it didn't really matter, since the dumb thing got an ever so convenient critical assault dive. I think I can maybe beat this, but it will take a little bit of luck. That isn't even to say I can beat the Lovers though, even if I do beat the Hierophant. Luckily on the next attempt, Hierophant went down. That fear ailment, or well, the ailments in general are so tough to work around, to the point that it becomes more of an annoyance, more than anything. Whoever cooked this up in the studio is freaky as hell for this one. The first attempt is so cursed. Not only is it taking ages to wither down its health, but then it critical hit me. I can already tell this is going to take a while, to say the least. So I decided to go back and grab a ascetic charm, which allows us to resist charm for the Lovers fight to go a bit smoother. Let's see how this next attempt goes. Every attempt so far has ended with a critical hit holy arrow. Is it a guaranteed crit or something? What are the odds? How does this happen every single attempt? After another attempt of getting critical hit twice by the holy arrow, I decided to go back to the drawing board, figure out what I can and cannot do, and what can null the pierce so I can get further than 10 turns. After doing a quick look at the Velvet Room fusions, I found it. I found what can get us through this most challenging battle yet. Eligor. His innate resistance to pierce and null fire will do wonders for this fight, since that's what the Lovers mainly uses, is Agidyne and then the Holy Arrow. So I decided to return to Tartarus and grind that 1 level to get Eligor. Once Eligor was tamed, I went ahead and fused Oni, which will be awesome for later since he has the highest strength so far. And Oni actually is useful later on, you'll see. Okay, we're back in the fight, and this time I discovered another problem. The Lover's resistance to pierce, which I didn't really think about Eligor having only those skills. Time to go back for the 3rd time. After around an hour, I got to level 32. I finally created an Elogord that will win us this battle. Getsway plus charge will deal a tremendous amount of damage, along with the slash boost and it being a full moon, which we can maximize damage output. I think this will be the build that wins us the fight. And this indeed was. This fight went really well. The damage output is easily the best we've made by far. It made this fight far more manageable, even with the constant bombardment of charm moves. Turns out the ascetic charm did jack shit, literally nothing, for this fight at all. I never really put my faith in resistant ailment items because they honestly are useless most of the time. Overall, this fight was fun, but the ailments, as I mentioned earlier, always make fights more difficult, and at times an absolute headache. And with that, we've won our hardest battle yet. This is the first time I've ever seen or interacted with the Great Clock. That's an extremely useful mechanic, or at least it would be if I weren't solo. We're almost at the next boss though, so let's keep moving. Next up we got floors 70 through 92. It looks like we'll be going up against 6 floor bosses this time. The Ochlocratic Sands. It went something like this. Anyways, onwards we go. I actually completely forgot about monad doors appearing. The fight was a complete wash, so there isn't much to talk about there. I will cover the major ones. I will cover the major monad doors on each floor, of course, but I'm not going to keep covering the small ones. The Arcanist Dissipator was another trivial fight, which was made possible by Black Frost. The Deviant Convict was the same as well, but this time with our favorite elephant Cyclops, Makala. Controlling independent partners was also the same as our last battle, and with that we are finished with these floors. We now have our first monad door to go through. In the locked chest on this floor I found Yukardi's battle panties. Anyways, so Cowardly Maya wasn't too bad either. First attempt I lost because it caught me by surprise, but the second attempt it got absolutely blasted. Our last foe, or well, foes since there's 3 of them. The fight went pretty standard. The first attempt I didn't know the Magius had repel strikes, so I got absolutely shit on. And with that, we're finished with this section. Once again, we are required to have a team, so we're picking our weakest guys. Starting off, I wanted to try and see what works, and as expected, I instantly got killed, but on the following attempt, it went far smoother. So for the first phase until it detaches, it spams pierce attacks. Our Makala deflects pierce, so I decided to take advantage of that. It did make the fight take a bit longer, however, efficiency is key in these types of fights. Now that they separated, this is where the real fight starts. Or so I thought. All the Justice did was end up spamming light skills, which Makala was weak to, but it never hit. The Chariot on the other hand had strike skills, but the damage never really amounted to anything. Since it doesn't seem to separate when receiving its own reflected damage, I just decided to let it keep using Pierce in its combined form to wither down its health. It didn't take as long as I thought, so I stuck with it until the very end to get it in the killing range, where I could then activate the Ice Theurgy to pull it off. Pretty straightforward battle. Let's continue our progress with Tartarus. By this point in the run, I feel like we're so high level that I don't think very many bosses from this point forward will really give us much of an issue. I won't get overconfident, but we're definitely hitting level 99 since all the XP from each encounter we have is going strictly to Makoto and Fuka. That being said, I do think the Monad bosses, the Reaper, and the last set of bosses on the final block will give us a run for our money, but we'll see. Venomous Magius, Bloody Myra, and Imposing Skyscraper were complete washes. Up next for the finale of this block, we got a major Monad door. Bronze Dice, Iron Dice, and Platinum Dice were all no problem. Platinum Dice killed me with a Mudo skill, but next attempt it got just completely wiped. It's always the ailment and chance-based skills that do us in.
An octopus?
Mid-August, and I had the choice to choose who I went with for the festival. I chose Fuka, of course. It's unfortunate they removed the Joker mask from P2, but honestly, not surprised. Anyways, the Hermit is up next, and it'll probably be a breeze as long as we have a persona that nulls electric damage. The biggest problem with this fight wasn't actually the Hermit itself, but having enough SP to last the entire duration of the battle. Needhog was our nullifying electric persona, while I basically played a game of cat and mouse going back and forth with Needhog and Makala, charging and using strike attacks with the occasional Ice Theurgy when available. It's crazy how bad having a null electric passive really shuts down this entire boss. This fight was pretty entertaining all things considered, but it made me realize how badly in need I am for a dedicated healing persona. That is definitely something we'll have to do on our next visit to Tartarus. We're now fully in swing into September, and man do I love this time of year. the changing seasons, slowly shifting into autumn for a short time before the frigid winter. It would have been neat to see an ice area in Tartarus, or I'll do you one better. If Tartarus would have had different environments depending on the season and the temperatures associated with said seasons. Now that I think about it, Persona 5, when you were in Mementos, depending on the season, I'm pretty sure you would get certain ailments. Or maybe it was that you would feel more susceptible to ailments. I can't remember, it's been a little while since I played Persona 5. Well anyways, we're finally able to go to Tartarus about 6 days later, but because I have a feeling we'll need it, I'm going to do another evening of cultivating the SP vegetables we've been growing, which is basically what I've been doing at night. Every night, all throughout the game, because there's still nothing to do in the remake of a 20-year-old game. Anyways, now that we're back, first up is Heartless Relic, which was a weak to Zeodyne, and next was the Raging Turret, and it was weak to Garu. So Succubus came in and cleaned up the fight no problem. But because of the fact that I didn't think to save beforehand, and this random Monad boss reflected my charge strike move, used Iha, and then killed me. After redoing those bosses, I continued on to the next floor until we got to the terminal table. I didn't have a null light persona on me, and all it did was spam Hama skills, so after dying immediately I went back to grab the White Rider and easily wiped it afterwards. The Jotun of Authority, however, wasn't as simple. The main gimmick of this fight is the left hand uses ailments while the right hand uses debuffs, which then the Jotun takes advantage of all of those to deal more damage and land critical hits, making the fight slightly more complicated than previous ones. We're about halfway through the game, so a bit earlier before I headed into Tartarus, I went ahead and purchased the Amaret necklace. This will allow us to null ailments and make terrible gimmick fights that rely solely on ailments become far less tedious. We'll continue to make more adjustments as time goes on. Now let's get back to the fight and see how we fare around this time. Well, turns out the necklace was useless. This time around, because I got a great run, I ended up taking out everyone except the left hand. So regardless of if it hit me with the ailment or not, I don't think it would have really mattered. From this point forward, I'm not really going to mention any more floor bosses that don't pose any difficulty. Only exciting or interesting battles, or major battles. What I will say about the isolated castle though, after the fight I found another tuxedo. But this time it was Shinjiro's. I'm assuming Makoto's won't show up until endgame, which is unfortunate. After clearing the floor's major Monad boss, it's time for a fight that notoriously is a bit of a headache for myself. Mainly just how spongy the strength arcana is, and the fortune's odds of wiping the team at the end. That was only really a thing I came across in Reload, since in P3 and Fest, the chance parts, I'm pretty sure you as the player were allowed to click the button to stop the wheel, which would lead to a level of manipulation you can use to make the fight go in your favor. Although, I may be completely misremembering that though, so, To give you a kind of idea of how much the roulette will play a role in hindering our fight, I decided to play this like a regular boss fight. I got 2 massive crits back to back, but since the strength has an innate physical resistance, I didn't do all too much damage. Fortune buffs our attack, but in the next roulette it hits us for a massive 300 damage, which kills us instantly. I decided to use Succubus's Concentrate plus Garudyne, but it turns out that does less damage than our crits, meaning we don't have a whole lot of viable options here. So maybe I'll do a combination of both. In the next attempt I tried to play it safe, which worked out really well, until I decided to switch to Succubus to do some magic damage, since it seemed like the roulette stopped being used. Next thing you know, the strength critical hit me and ended the attempt. The way the AI decides when it wants to do certain actions is kinda crazy. Anyway, the next attempt went more or less the same, but this time I was a bit more patient with my actions. Since your Theurgy fills up so quickly to an almost unfair degree, I basically just danced between using Charge, Diarhan, and Rakunda, which by then it would already be filled and it would do just great damage. The strength has such ridiculous defense that we couldn't have really gotten by any other way if we hadn't played the waiting game. Not to mention our team was kind of ill-suited for the bombardment of attacks thrown our way. Nonetheless, we still came out on top. After a slew of sad events, we're back at floors 145 to 172. Pagoda Disaster and Dancing Beast Wheel were no problems, but then we came across the strongest enemy yet.
The Reaper?
Our first attempt was an interesting one because we initially started off by reflecting quite a few of his attacks. However, we were hit with the Dakaja and then hit with the elemental weakness we didn't nullify, which we were then instantly wiped. Second attempt went more or less the same, but it was far more brutal. This time, I decided to fight a Shadow to max out our Theurgy to get a feel for how much damage we could possibly output, and well, the results speak for themselves. Yeah, not really great. However, it seems like I was able to bait him into doing pretty decent reflect damage before getting blasted once again. Now, since I'm not a glutton for punishment and I actually value my sanity, we will get our revenge soon enough. But for now, I think it would be best to proceed forward. The last two bosses weren't a problem, but the invigorated Gygus didn't go down quite as quickly as previous floor bosses. I also got Fuka's battle armor. Minotaur 2 completely reflects physical. I'm interested to see if this fight is any more complex than previous ones. No, it wasn't. It's another uninteresting boss that spams ailments to waste the player's time. The rest of the Monad Doors bosses were a sweep.
This will be your end. Alright.
We're now on to Jin and Takaya. I was genuinely surprised to see Takaya two-shot me like that. In fairness, Jin and Takaya were both targeting me right off the bat. Let's give it another go with things in order. I'm surprised how difficult this is shaping up to be. After that last attempt, which was the second one, I'm starting to wonder why every persona in my inventory is weak to Garu. I'm surprised I didn't notice a major oversight like this. We're definitely going to have to visit the Velvet Room for some tweaks. Let's try again after they're done. Okay. Barong is who I chose to fuse for this battle. He naturally nullifies quite a few elements, so by the time I pass on my other passives, Barong completely nullifies all elements besides physical. This fight went a lot smoother this time after getting Barong. Unfortunately, all I can boil it down to is using Mizudine, but that was the play. I also forgot to get a persona with Concentrate, although it didn't make much of a difference in the end. I remember this fight being extremely easy in Fest, but in the remake, having enemies use shift and actually take advantage of weaknesses makes the fight more difficult. To go on a slight side tangent, enemies should be able to use the exact same abilities available to the player. This is usually why there tends to be an imbalance in difficulty with modern Megaton and RPGs at large. A lot of enemies simply don't have the same mechanics available to us, the player. The best examples of enemies having the same abilities as the player and this working is the current battle we're in and SMT4, where enemies have the smirk mechanic available, just like the player when taking advantage of weaknesses. This should be a standard, especially in Megaton where enemies should have the same, if not better skills and mechanics than the player themselves. I mean, us the players are supposed to outsmart the AI. Having them be more versatile keeps the imbalance in check as well. Anyways, without much consequence, Jin and Takaya were defeated. Our final full moon boss is right in front of us. Let's go on ahead and get this over with. Let me start off by saying, this was the most entertaining fight in the run so far. It also took the longest by far. It was the perfect balance of dealing damage while figuring out how to navigate all of his absurdly powerful attacks. A majority of fights prior have been very easy, so it's refreshing to see a boss give me a run for my money. Given the Hanged Man has a Beast Eye equivalent move that gives him more turns than normal, making it a bit more difficult than your average boss fight. Time to talk strategy. It was more or less the same as what I've been doing, so charging then brave blading. However, this time Callie did the heavy lifting. I wasn't sure if this would work too well, since Callie is vulnerable to his late stage Moon Dune skill, but there isn't much of an option. Unfortunately, by the end, his power became too overwhelming. I don't have the best answer for long-term buffing yet, nor debuffing either. Heat Riser and Debilitate will do that job later, but as of now I don't have anything all that viable. I also didn't think of having a persona with Dekaja, which made this fight even more of a pain. After many failed attempts, and I mean many, I decided to use the Heat Riser items I've been collecting during the nighttime, and that worked. Those items I got from cooking with Akihiko, along with the other plant-based buffs, it turns out it was extremely useful to focus on specific people during the nighttime to get the best battle items. By using those when I am ready to unleash my fully charged Theurgy, I was able to hit a high 1700 damage per attack, which at the end helped me finish the fight. The run ender so far is the last phase, where he concentrates, heat risers, and at times uses Debilitate on the player, which leads into a Megidolon, along with the occasional run where he critical hits me with God's Hand, if I wasn't on a persona that nullified it. The Hangman probably has one of the smartest AI in the game. Okay, so final attempt, and I'm implementing everything I know from the past 6+ failed attempts. Over 2 hours of tries, I finally had an attempt I was looking for. Prior to the run ending Megidolon, I would typically have to buff and or heal to even have a chance of surviving the attack. This would be to combat his setup of Heat Riser, Concentrate, and in the following turn Megidolon. This attempt, however, he surprisingly didn't go for Heat Riser, but instead God's Hand, then Karn, then Concentrate. I knew I could survive a focused Megidolon, so I went for a risky play. This allowed me such a big window of attack that I made the bold move of using a charged Brave Blade, which would get him to even lower HP. This in return would take 100 of my HP. Now it's time to see what he'll do. He fired off his own attack, which dealt massive damage, leaving me at a mere 60 HP. I healed, then fired off a powerful attack of my own, which brought this long, arduous battle to a close. After our fight last night, let's watch as the entirety of Seas canonically gets soloed by Aegis. Keep in mind, this is the same team that supposedly thinks that they can defeat Nyx. I just find this so crazy yet hilarious that this is Atlas's way to say that Aegis alone can solo Seas, but somehow he can't beat Ryoji in a fight, where he uses not even 10% of what she can do in every other battle. Anyways, back to Tartarus once Mitsuru is done moping around. I think it's for the best if we skip going to Tartarus tonight. Not everyone is here, so I doubt anybody would want to go anyways. Well, it's fine. For a change, we're going to Tartarus later in the month once we finish some social links, because we're starting to kind of fall behind on Fusion XP. It's not Christmas, but we're in Tartarus. One dive for me and that battle's over. After carelessly slaughtering our enemies, I found a tuxedo for Ken. The Reaper has appeared once again for us to take on. I have a lot more confidence in this attempt since we are far higher level than before, but I'm not sure if this will be quite enough. Even after all that prep, I got mopped by his Megidolon. I was honestly confident I could survive it, especially considering the fact that I Heat Risered and he wasn't buffed either. In the last attempt, I survived a Megidolon that did only around 320 damage, but this one for some reason did over 600. I must have not caught what the difference was in the two runs. Damage calculations must have made a big difference. Well, we did a lot better than last time. We got him down to half this time, meaning the final go at him once we return to the tower in January will ultimately be the one. By then I should be in the 80s and unlocked plenty of powerful persona that will likely be the key to winning. I could definitely beat him now, but since this is a fight that can be challenged and won at any point, I'll save this one for last. With that exciting climax for one of our last visits to Tartarus, let's head back and see what the rest of November and December got in store for us. After Junpei dies and Aegis gets destroyed by Ryoji's mere presence, the month of December was pretty unremarkable, besides finding another tuxedo which somehow was for the dog, but not me. Other than that, we give Ryoji our answer, that we kill him, and then we finally finish the run. Of course, we can't take the easy way out, so now it's basically time to finish our final social link. I won't be going to Tartarus until the very last day when Nyx descends.
Welcome back.
I really love the aesthetic of this final block. It feels ethereal in a way that not many games are able to replicate for me. It's quite different from the many interpretations of heaven. I think that's because this isn't heaven. The way I interpret this place is as a mockery of heaven. We're in Tartarus after all. Nothing about this place is supposed to be godlike or like a paradise in really any capacity. If anything, it's more in line with what a sinner's interpretation of an ethereal place would be like. It's beautiful, yet very twisted in its own right, which is something to love. Even in the original, it had its own atmosphere. This version of the final block, as I mentioned before, feels blinding. Like a white room filled with nothingness. Yet somehow, the rays of light are still gracing the place despite the outside being a black, murky wasteland of green. While the original had a sort of lonely feel to it, like a soulless palace filled with the eerie silence, with only the silence being broken from the sounds of your team's overwhelming enthusiasm and pride to see things through to the end. It's honestly a fantastic tone to set. I said a while ago somewhere, but I always felt this last block should have had different battles and boss music to show that C's determination is real. The reincarnation version of Mass Destruction fit that bill perfectly. As for the boss track, well, that's something for Meguro at the time, or well, now Atayushi Kito to figure out now. All 6 previous floor bosses were swift defeats. However, I thought it'd be strange not to talk about our final floor boss of the game, Genocidal Mercenary. Now this boss in OGP3 was a big challenge for me. Fun, but very much a pain. Having the AI controlled teammates made it even more entertaining since you had to correctly command each teammate's actions and come up with your own proper strategy. This version of the battle unfortunately was a lot easier. That isn't to say it was a total pushover, but it was definitely much easier than before. I took this opportunity to try Armageddon. I'm not sure if 9,999 is the normal damage output, but that's a lot either way. The best news to come out of all this is the fact that we finally got our butler outfit, and it's okay. It's not bad, but I thought it'd be better. Well, I've already committed to this bit this far, I might as well see it through to the end. Now before we take on the final Monad door, we have someone else that has been looking for us for the past few blocks, the Reaper. So let me start off by saying, this fight is completely possible. I'd argue the more nullifications you have, the more the AI just gets desperate and uses Megidolon. So in response, I just nuked him. Okay, so let me explain. Earlier when I mentioned not knowing if Armageddon does 9,999 even, I genuinely didn't know that happens no matter what. It's very overpowered, I don't even know where to begin. I did want to beat the Reaper fair, which is why I went through the effort of saving him for later. But honestly, looking back at it, I probably should have beaten him then and there. So that makes me wonder, if the move does 9,999, can Elizabeth be beaten, or does her health exceed that? Well, this doesn't really matter anymore since I didn't meet the requirements. I do sort of feel bad about not giving the Reaper a fair shake, but I don't think I can re-challenge him. Regardless, it's time to finish the run. Our only obstacles are Strega since I made a quick work of the final Monad door. Let's do this. Jin's fight took a solid 10 minutes of just buffing, concentrating, and dealing damage. But midway through the fight, he kept chucking EX grenades at me, which started to hurt quite a lot. Then, once he took his forbidden pills or whatever, he just began spamming Megidolon, as per every fight in the game, apparently. If you think that was bad, Takaya somehow ended up being even worse. I initially came into this fighting a fair fight, but then Takaya literally started a shit throwing contest after the first 2 turns. Which led to us literally slinging Megidolon at each other, which was ironically the most fun I've had with a boss fight in hours. It turns out towards the end I can't use Armageddon unless he's in kill range, otherwise he'll use his Theurgy, which is a guaranteed loss. Death after death after death, until I thought I saw the end of the tunnel, until his Theurgy is scripted and mandatory, meaning that 999,000 meant absolutely nothing. This time, I did it after his Theurgy activated, and it worked. Now, time for the Night Queen herself, Nyx. We're finally here. I love this fight, despite it having a lot of phases. Shifting through Arcanas is honestly a really neat concept. I also love Nyx's quotes throughout each phase.
The moment man devoured the fruit of knowledge, he sealed his fate.
Each phase was more or less a repeat of the last. There wasn't really much of note besides the long, drawn-out slugfest of me wiping out each phase. I know that may come across as anticlimactic, but honestly it's to be expected. What made the original so difficult is the fact that, as I mentioned before, The AI party members added a layer of strategy, honestly, that is unseen in most RPGs, even for the times. One thing I will say is that in my original playthrough of P3R, they did balance Nyx fairly well, and in my notes at the time, I found Nyx to be very fun. When giving direct inputs, there needs to be something to directly be at odds with that style. The original worked because it was designed that way. Later iterations still used that design, but didn't take into account the power and balance of player being able to select more effective moves. With this run, by the end of the game you can null, drain, and reflect just about everything. Most difficult late game fights boil down to 3 things: almighty skills, absurd tankiness, and a predictable, almost scripted moveset. I know it isn't always an easy problem to fix, but some Megaten can do it well, while some cannot. Shin Megami Tensei 5's Demi-Fiend had the same problem where he was all of those 3 things, which made the fight not very gratifying by the end. If anything, it was more frustrating with how much time is wasted with attempt after attempt. It was less about the real-time strategizing the games are known for, and more about if you know the moveset. Once you know the moveset, you just spend hours prepping, closely watching for certain battle cues, and praying your run randomly doesn't end. Anyways, back to the battle at hand. We finally got to the final phase. And can we talk about how much cooler this design is than the original?
This is Nyx's true form.
Seeing Nyx actually become her true avatar form and awaken to her full power, this is one of those things that the remake nailed so much better.
Stay strong, everyone!
P3R had a good mix of improvements and also questionable alterations in general. This battle, for example, thematically, the green sky makes more sense because, you know, it's the dark hour. But despite that, I prefer the blue night sky that was in the original. I just find it to be a very beautiful set piece that was amplified with the PS2's more grimier image. To finish off this fight and the run, for good old time's sake, I used our friend Armageddon. We then have to finish the job though, our final job.
We do! How can we help him?
Don't give up! We're gonna get through this, together!
Give him strength! Take my life if you must! You better come back from this! You hear me? Don't believe it! He's going to face it all alone!
No, he's not alone! I'm not letting him die!
You promised, didn't you? Please, you have to make it back!
All right, let's do this.
And with that, that was Can I Beat Persona 3 Reload with only the protagonist on Merciless. All around, this was a fun run. I honestly thought this would have been a little bit more difficult, but ultimately the endgame was unfortunately a breeze. I think the next time when I do a challenge video, I'll look into more challenging run ideas. On a final note, I want to talk a little bit about P3. There were a lot of changes in quality of life features that were added that both helped P3 as a whole, yet held it back. It helped me come around to Yukari, a character for a long time I had mixed feelings about, to the point that I would argue that Yukari is one of the best main cast members in the game. Her new VA's performance, Heather Gonzalez, truly brought the character to life in ways her previous VA simply could not do. I found Nyx to be one of the best final bosses in the series, cinematically. It wasn't all too difficult, it was nicely balanced and entertaining. I like that they chose in-game to show the raw spiritual pressure Nyx exudes. It hit way better than a pre-rendered or animated cutscene. The use of the 3 in general throughout the game was great. My only wish is that they one-to-one remastered certain tracks. The remixes are all 50-50. Some unironically are better than the original, while others are not as good. Overall, a lot of tracks tonally were slightly shifted in the bass department. In certain cases, this worked really well. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, I don't fuck with the original Deep Mentality at all. That shit is hot ass. And then there's songs like Joy and Iwatodai Dorm that just fucking stinks. And you know the battle tracks, they especially got shit on the most. There are special cases like Changing Seasons where the original was absolutely phenomenal, but somehow P3R made it even better. Like, it's crazy. Also, all the new tracks just are excellent. Even if at times tracks take a big hit via their new remixes, it sucks, it's unfortunate, but for this level of unmistakable quality, the trade-off is just far too good. But anyways, that's enough of all my ranting. Make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below your thoughts on the remake. I appreciate everyone's time spent here, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. And please, don't forget, cherish your life, your loved ones, your friends, family, and bye-bye for now.